President Trump is pardoning a former Virginia sheriff convicted of taking $75,000 in bribes. Scott Jenkins was sentenced to 10 years in prison for fraud and bribery charges in March. President Trump blamed his prosecution on former President Biden's Department of Justice, calling it corrupt and weaponized. CBS News Department of Justice correspondent Scott MacFarlane is following the latest from our Washington bureau. So, Scott, this is not the president's first pardon, far from it, but why does this one stand out?
This is going to inflame criticisms that the president is abusing his pardon powers to help loyalists and to circumvent juries and judges. The pardon of Scott Jenkins, who was convicted of bribery and fraud by a jury in rural Virginia in 2 hours, is sparing Jenkins from a 10-year prison term. And the pardon was given to Jenkins the day before Jenkins was to report to prison to begin serving that sentence. There are arguments you can make about the case, Lindsay, but what critics of the administration are saying more fundamentally is that this circumvented the entire traditional pardon process itself. Typically, pardon recipients would have to apply, pay some of the restitution they owe the government, show some remorse, have served some of their sentence, have exhausted their appeals. None of that was done by Scott Jenkins. He hadn't even started serving his sentence or initiated much of his appeals process, and he is unapologetic and still denies what he was convicted of earlier this year.
And there is a system for presidents to issue pardons. How is President Trump using it?
Some presidents have a variety of takes on this. Former President Biden had any number of pardons he issued by the hundreds that went through the traditional system. Then he had those 11th hour pardons just before leaving office, where he preemptively pardoned his family members and members of the January 6th Select Committee in the U.S. House. President Trump has seemed to use the atypical system more than anything. He has doled out pardons to supporters who did not go through the traditional system. Think of the 1,500-plus January 6 defendants. You could think of a Las Vegas city council member he pardoned a few weeks ago who was accused of using money for a police memorial for personal expenses and her daughter's wedding. Then you have the matter of Scott Jenkins, the sheriff in Virginia, who very proudly wore that red MAGA hat and was a Trump loyalist from the start.
We should mention also, Scott, that NPR is suing the Trump administration over an executive order that would cut funding for it and PBS. How is this playing out?
There are about 350 federal suits against the Trump administration so far. This is among the latest, but also involves one of the higher profile plaintiffs. National Public Radio is alleging a violation of its First Amendment rights by the president's order to defund some of their, if not all of their, federal funding. That's a percentage of what they use to operate, and they made the argument outside of court that could be a crippling loss of money for NPR and its local radio affiliates and local newsrooms across the country. Their lawsuit argues this violates First Amendment rights if they're being defunded because of their speech, but the White House pushes back, saying that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting has been politically motivated.
All right, Scott MacFarlane, thank you.